Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing this evening? Doing a camera check. Excuse me. I have my camera. Honest to God, I did take 6 drinks of water before I started. I'm gonna do the check the other camera. It's set up for my screen of my sewing machine. So it's, camera to a computer screen. So it might be a little wavy, but let's see. It's not too bad. I can't come in any closer. Well, I could, but I think it'll become more wavy. Let's see. Yes, I see how it gets. At least I'm getting the lines in it. So I'll stay right there. That way you can see the width and length, and then you can see what tab I'm using. And I'm going to go over that first so that I can then put the camera back for sewing. So just checking that out. Here's our little project. With all its little stitching. And I'm going to show you how I did the eyeball. I was going to put a little button there, and then I realized that if you put a cup on that, you might be on your button. Hi, Christine. So we just have a few minutes to wait. Are you sewing along, Christine? I know. Did everybody notice my blunder of today? I posted for tonight what the project was and forgot to put down the fabric requirements. And it wasn't until I was sitting here and I was wondering if I had put down that we're going to be using scraps for the birds. So then I went and looked, and not only wasn't there scraps for the birds, but there wasn't anything at all. No wonder that post was so short. Yeah, is it too wavy, Christine? Can you still see it okay? So you can see if I move to a different stitch. Hopefully. I was gonna do it blindly, but hi Rhonda. As always, yes. I'm not sure what that means, Christine. I was gonna do it blindly and just tell you what stitches I use, but I thought for some people, if they're not sure what the buttonhole stitch looks like on your screen, I would at least do that. And then when I go back to the work table, I'll fix the camera back to the over the sewing area. How are you today, Rhonda? It's so nice and warm. I had my sliding door open, but there was a couple of, I don't know what, cars, trucks, whatever, that went by that were so loud that I figured it would hurt your eardrums, so I closed that. But I was enjoying the night air because it's still 63 here. Oh, thank you, Christine. I can still see it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you being my, what would I call that? My editor, my video editor. How's that? Okay, so we got one more minute. Rhonda, are you sewing or just relaxing and watching tonight? I know, I'm so nosy, huh? It's so quiet. What do we got? We're almost to time. I like to go 7:01. Just for the latecomers. Or the on-time people, I should say. Instead of us early birds. Oh yeah, your dogs, Rhonda, must be loving this weather. They can go in and out without wet, muddy paws or snowbound fur. And well, this is the time of the year when we have to enjoy the warm days, and then it goes back to the cold, but we're getting warmer. Okay, so if you don't have the Gemini, I would cut the top I cut 3 pieces 7.5 by 5. 7.5 by 5. You could be bigger if you wanted to. 3 pieces plus your batting would be all that same size. And the applique could be anything you want. So if you've got, we sometimes forget that we have books that we've done applique in, whether it's a quilt, table runner, whatever. Nothing says we can't take a little bit of that applique out and put it on something smaller. You could have 2 birds kind of overlapping each other. You could have someone's initial. I'm putting this project on my April insanity list. I want to do like a dozen of them and just have them for gifts to give, because it's nice if you maybe someday if you visit someone, or it's pretty flat and probably pretty easy to mail in that it doesn't weigh much, first class, $1.50 or something like that, as a just cheer somebody up. So that's on my April insanity list, which starts April 1st and goes every day through April, and it'll be on my blog. So no www, just Loreen, LOREEN.typepad, TYPEPAD.com, or on my Facebook. I've done this before. I do a new, it's like, it's cataloging your year of what you're going to do. Work on stuff you have, new stuff, and I'll go into it more later on. I was just killing a little time now. Okay, where are we? 7:03. I killed more than a little time. Okay, so I'm just going to set this here. And the first thing I want to, first of all, I'm going to be using the strip cutter set. And I'm going to use the biggest one. So this is just fabric strips, it says. So I'm going to use that. What's nice about this all by itself is you can cut these mug rugs out and batting, I don't know, 15 seconds for each one, maybe. We'll see. We'll time it. So I'm going to use that. And I'm using this Gemini, and it'll say on it somewhere it says multimedia, which if it's this color, this coppery color, that means it's made to go through thicker things. So I'm going to use that. I have another one. So they do have other things, and again, it doesn't have to be birds, doesn't have to be a die that you have, could be just something traced from a book. But I excuse me, see, I'm stuttering now. So I'm going to show you exactly how I do my steam-a-seam and all that. But what I want to do first is I want to go to the other camera so then I can get it adjusted back and talk about what stitches I'm going to use. So regular straight stitch for sewing. So let me switch over. Hi, Cindy. How are you? Okay, so for those of you that just came in, I've pointed the camera towards my screen, and I know it can be wavy because it's the camera to a computer screen, and so I want to do this all at one time rather than go back and forth and make you dizzy with the camera, just to show what stitches I use. Okay, so my regular straight stitch is, and I'm on a baby lock, what is it, Solaris, But most Baby Lock Brother, most all your machines have similar screens, but the Baby Lock Brother have similar screens. They're just different sizes and different amounts of stitches. So the first one is my regular straight stitch, which is generally it's the default when you put your sewing machine, turn your sewing machine on. So it's 1.03, and I leave it at the default settings. And you know it's the default settings because you see, oh, here, let me do this. They're all, see how they got black around them? So that means that's the default settings. So if you change anything, so if I change this length, you see how now, and I don't want to tip down too much, there we go. There we go. You see now this setting doesn't have black around it. And I have a reset button in case I forgot, and that just puts it back to regular. When you change these settings and you don't save them, when you shut your machine off or you simply go to another stitch, it'll be gone. So if you change your settings, write it down because you think, oh, I won't move, and then next thing you know, you've moved to something else. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to do the blanket stitch, excuse me, for the applique. And so you can see that's the blanket stitch. Oop, hold on. There we go. So the blanket stitch is on most all machines, except maybe, well, not your mechanical ones. Oh, they could be. I'm not positive. But most all your machines, when you get up and you've spent a few $100s for a machine. So my blanket stitch is on my tab 2 right here. Some machines, the tabs will run down the sides, and other machines might not have this kind of screen, but they'll have the flip top at the top of the machine, you know, where you do your threading, the little cover comes up, and all the numbers and so forth are in there with pictures. So I'm going to go to tab 2, and the stitch I'm going to use is 2-04, and let me see if I can lift this up without making you too dizzy. And it looks like a little ladder with one side missing. You see that? And in this case, oops, sorry. See, every time I move this, hold on. In this case, I didn't change anything, but if I want to change the stitch that's going left, which is the bite of the stitch, I would change my width. If I want more space between those bites, I would change my length. Okay? Now the last stitch I'm going to show you is what I used to make the little bird's eye, because I wasn't putting on that little tiny applique. No thanks. Well, putting it on's okay. It would have been stitching. It would have been an issue. So if you have buttonhole stitches, well, come on, there we go. If you go all the way down to the bottom of wherever your buttonhole stitches are, oh, see, I'm getting that. I knew I shouldn't have moved that camera. Let me come in a little ways. This is your eyelet stitch. Okay? And you're going to stitch your eyelet on a scrap before you put it on your bird. I had to go down in the width and length, which it goes together because it's proportional, all the way down. So I just want you to make note, mine is 4-24, but generally any machine that does a one-step buttonhole will have this eyelet stitch. This is an eyelet, but it's thinner. We want this one right here, the fattest one. Okay? So let me back this up. No, back up. And if I want to make it smaller, so I'm going to go down. Oh, I got to pick it first. Okay, so if you watch these two numbers, if I go down with either the width or length, do you see they both go down? Because it's a circle. And mine will only go down to 5 millimeters. Your machine may only have one option. I can't promise you anything. Okay, so I wanted to show you those different stitches so that you'll know where to look on your machine, or what to look for when you do your stitching. So I wanted to do that first. And I always, when I'm done, I always put mine back to what it's supposed to be. So is there any questions on that before I move the camera? And I have to wait a second. You'll get a pause because you're about, I swear, like a half a minute behind me. Okay, so I'm going to switch back over to the desktop. And we're getting that, trying to move that glare. So that I now can move the camera back where it usually goes. Hopefully without tipping stuff over. And without knocking the tripod off the table. Okay, and I didn't see any questions, so that's good. Okay, just checking, so now we're back there. Okay, so we got that out of the way. We're going to use the straight stitch, we're going to use the blanket stitch, and we're going to use the eyelet stitch. In that order. Okay, so let me get some stuff out of the way. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure my iron's on, and I've got some odds and ends of, I use Steam-A-Seam Fusible Web. Steam-A-Seam Light 2 is what I use. So here's how I would do, here's how I would do mine. Rather than have it done ahead, I thought I'd share my how I do this. And I got some salvage there. So before I make a mistake and use it, I cut some salvage today, and this one had little flowers. So I'm starting to collect them. See what can be made of that. So I have my bird fabric. This is so we got the bird, then we got the big wing, and then the little wing. And the big wing only shows a little bit, see? Okay? So, here's my bird, here's my big wing, and here's my little wing. And they were just scraps I had, and they don't necessarily have to be, straight, or don't trim them up and make them pretty. So I turned them all to the back side so I don't forget. And I'm going to use up some of my scraps of Steam-A-Seam, and I just put them into a Ziploc bag. So I'm going to see who will fit. So that doesn't fit on there. But this one does. So all I want to do is, I'm just going to cut around. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to cut around. I got plenty of room around it, and that's going to go on this fabric. So I'm going to peel off the first paper, and the paper that stays is the one with the yellow graph on it. And I'm going to put this down. And the whole point of doing this, this isn't the best one to show you because my red's a little skimpy. But I don't need to cut my fabric into a shape. I don't need to cut this into a shape, but I always want my Steam-A-Seam to be not bigger than my fabric, because then the steamer seam will stick to my ironing board or my pressing sheet. And I just cut off the extra. So that one's done. So that's this guy. And then my little wing, I've got a little piece here. So my little wing fits on that fine. I'm just making my fabric. It'll show you better on the next one. Come on. Oh, for crying out loud. So if you have trouble getting it undone, if you just kind of crinkle it. It's just being a rascal today. And make sure when you peel your paper off that the sticky is on the part that you're saving, not on the piece you're getting rid of. And if it isn't, you kind of grab onto the webbing and you'll see it. It looks just like webbing. And I have a little piece hanging over. Now, if I need to, if I'm not sure where I am to place my my wing, which should be fine if I just place it in the middle, but if you're concerned, then you can just cut off any part of the fabric that doesn't have the steamer seam on it. And you would do that after, I did it before, you would do that after you press. So let's put that there. And now I need the bird. So I got a big piece for that. So I'm just going to come over to this end. And, can you see it okay? Doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be pretty. Mine kind of looks like I used the weed whacker to do it. And now I'm going to put this one up. I'm going to take a little bit off because my fabric is a little smaller. So I'm going to take this one off. And remember, we're on the back of our fabric. Excuse me. There, this shows you better. So see, now I'm going to go press it. Well, I'm not going to go press it. I'm going to bring it here and press it. Excuse me. Forget what I was going to say now. Let's press. And my hold on, my applique pressing sheet is, I can't quite reach it, and I have the table in front of it where I was setting that camera. So I'm just gonna use one of the papers I pulled off to be my little shield. And we're gonna count to 20. And you notice with the front of my iron is up past because the front has those little holes. And this little iron is extra hot, so I don't have to go as long. But you're going to, see if I can show you. See if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see the difference. No. So I can see the difference between the side I've pressed and the side I haven't. The side I pressed gets a little more or a little less opaque. What do we do for applique birds if you don't have a Gemini? Look in some of your applique books. Look in your Count On It book. Look in any patterns you might have. You can do clip art from off of the internet. Free clip art. Just, you just want an outline of something. So you're going to count to 20. And then I always flip it over and count about 10 on the other side. And I'm going a little faster because, We don't want to be here all night watching me iron. Okay, so this one is ready. I could trim my fabric down, but I know that my steamer seam is in the middle, and I can feel it. So I can leave it just like that. If you don't have enough room on your Gemini that you need that little extra room, then just go ahead and trim it where there's no steamer seam. And again, don't have to make it all straight and pretty. It's fine. So that's up to you if you want to do that or not. Okay, I mean, if I stuck a little piece up in the corner and had to guess where it was, that would be different. But so this one's ready. Here's my next one. And you're going to use your applique pressing sheet. And this one pretty well takes up the whole iron. And remember, you're going to count to 20, and not 1001, 1002, just count to 20. And then flip it over and count to about 10. If you don't press this enough, your needle's going to get all junky and gummed up, and then your thread sticks to the little stickiness on your needle, and then you're going to cry, and we don't want that. And don't count to like 40. 20's more than enough. If you find that when you're stitching that your thread is and your needle's getting gummed up, just take it off of your stitching and press it a little more. Okay, so that's this guy, and the last one is my little wing, and I've already trimmed that one. Oh, but I got to press it. See, I almost forgot. That would have been good. So does anybody have any questions while I'm counting to 20? Does that work for you, Christine? You've got your seasonal silhouettes book. You've got count on it. I'm trying to think of what you have. You can you'll be surprised what you've got around the house or around the sewing room. Ow, hot. Okay. Trying to move that table a little bit out of my way. So we want to make sure when we cut, it's fabric side up. If we did it from the back, it would be a reversed bird. So if you want one bird this way and one the other, then you want one set of fabrics face down and one set of fabrics face up. So if I had two wings I was doing, I'd have just remember right sides together. Okay? So let me get my plates. So today I have the regular Gemini plates. I'm trying to be the equal opportunity teaching. Trying to move that extra the extra steamer seam out of the way. Okay, so I'm using the new fabric plates. I'm telling you, they weigh a ton, absolute ton. So I have a clear plate, then the A, see the A plate. Okay, then I'm going to put down my pieces. Oh, almost did that one wrong way too. Okay, now, if I'm going to do multi-layers, so say I wanted to do 10 of these, you want to count the steamer seam. I count it as one layer. Okay? So if I was going to what do they say? Like normally like 6 or 8 fabrics or so. So if I was doing 6 fabrics, I'd have 3 of the fabrics with the steamer seam for the bird, or 4. Try 4. Just try it and see. The steamer seam is probably a little less than a layer of fabric, but that's the rule of thumb I go by. And it only takes a couple minutes, so it's not like, you have to wait an hour for it to be done. And then on top is B, and again, I'm using the new fabric plates, and then the clear. So your sandwich is very simple. Clear plate A, your fabric and dies facing down. I got to make sure, because the other day I was facing up, so it didn't cut, obviously. Everybody's facing down. And then your B and a clear. So it's just four pieces to the sandwich as far as plates go. I was trying to reach across further than I could reach. Okay, and you're always going to turn your plates just like you normally do. So I'm going to turn it over. Turn it over. Oh. And here's my pieces. I'll put them in I'm just going to stick them up on my machine to get them out of the way. So my bird's all done. So now I want to turn my plates. So now I want to do my actual mug rug. So I had a strip of fabric, and I was working with a fat quarter. So a fat quarter on the long way is about 21. So it's not quite long enough to do 3 whole pieces, but I don't need 3 whole pieces. And let me see if I can show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to place my die halfway between what's on this side and what's on the left and what's on the right. Okay? So I'm going to fold this up, and I'm going to fold it up till it hits the die. Take the die out of that side, because the die can't be inside. I'm just using it for my reference point. And then I'm going to fold this one up till it meets the die. And what I really want to have, because remember this is a strip cutter, so there's no blade here or here. On the short sides, there's no blades. So I just want to have it so that my fabric is even with or just inside of these edges. Now, don't be upset because this is shorter. So if you can see, this one ends right here. Do you see that? This one is a little longer. I'm going to sneak it out a little bit. Here we go. And now my little edges are hanging off. And if they're not quite hanging off, that's okay. We'll deal with that in a second. Let me get this out of the way. The reason that my two of the pieces can be shorter is because they're going to be the back, the 2 pieces on the back. And see, this is folded over, and this piece that you see a little bit of is underneath, and it's folded over. So I don't need it the whole length. And I'm overlapped by this far, which is probably 3 or 4 inches. And I really only need to be overlapped a little. So I was trying to make the best use of a fat quarter going the long way. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Okay. now I just need my batting. And I had this is a great place for extra pieces of batting. So I have this extra piece of batting, and I'm going to just lay it down at the edge of my fabric here. I'm not sure if it's long enough. Okay, so it is long enough. And I've got this piece. I had to look and see which way this feeds into the Gemini. Okay, so I can cut this off, or if I'm feeding my dies, my sandwich into the machine from this end, going this towards me this way, then this is hanging out the back. It wouldn't matter, but I'm going to cut it off just so nobody gets all nervous. Okay. Now I'm going to put my die on, and I want to make sure I'm cutting some off of each side. And see how my batting is longer? I'm not going to fiddle around with that because I can take care of that after it cuts. So I don't want you to be fiddling with part of it that it's just much easier to take care of after we get it cut. We just want to make sure these are cut this way. We're going to come in and manually cut across. So don't worry about it, even if you had an inch or a half an inch. I don't want you to sit and fuss and try to get this exactly right, okay? And in our Build-A-Block, we don't have a die this big that goes all the way around. I don't know if in another set there may be, but I know a lot of people have the strip set. So this will work fine for what we want to do. You know, it's a mug rug, not your prom dress. Okay, so we want to make sure we've got all our fabrics under there. I can see my fabric on this side. We're not going to concern ourselves with the short side. Okay, so I'm on A. A is always first. That was nice of him to do that. So A is first. So I got clear plate A. And now I have B and a clear plate. And I'm ready to run it through the machine. Okay, so again, I'm going to turn my plate as I take them off so they're ready for the next time. I'm going to go ahead and take that right off, get my plates out of the way because I'm done cutting. So let me take this, put it out of the way, and let me turn this so you can see. So, and you see, let's turn it over. This might work better this way if we turn it over. I can see where everything cut to. Now, I folded my fabric and it isn't cutting the fold that I made because it's not cutting across the short section. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my little ruler and I can go ahead and just get the edges out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring my ruler so that, let's see if you can see. I want to make sure my ruler's straight. So I'm straight with my fabric here and here. And then I'm going to scooch my ruler towards that fold so that I can just barely see the fold. You can see more of the batting, but I can just barely see that fold. And if you're taking off a little more on one side than the other, as long as you're straight across here, that's what you want, because you might not have folded your fabric perfectly. I got a little clinging of it. And then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line my ruler up, straight line and straight line to my fabric here. So I've got a straight line here and a straight line here. Then I'm going to scooch over. I'll see if I can do it again so you can see. So straight line, straight line. I'm going to scooch it towards me. And I'm scooching towards the fold. Now, if you look, you can almost see that I have less blue fabric down here and I got a little more up there. That's fine because we're going to make it straight. And that's why I say don't concern yourself with getting the short edges right before you cut, because we can make them right afterwards. That way, my fold might not have been perfect. It's okay. So I'm just going to turn it and make sure again that I'm straight on my fabric. Okay. Now the one that's all one piece, let me get rid of this stuff. The fabric that's one long piece, that's the front of my mug rug. So I'm just going to lay my pieces there so I remember that's the front of my mug rug. And my back, one is a little shorter than the other, and that's fine. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down about an inch. Let me get my ironing station going here. My batting is fine. So I'm going to turn this one down about an inch and press. Okay. And we're going to stitch this in a minute, so I'm just going to set it up here by my iron. And then I'm going to take this one. Well, let's leave this down for a minute so that you can see. And I'm going to leave it upside down so that it's easy for you to understand what we're doing. Okay, so here's our front. I'm just going to lay this back so it's even here. So here's the back, here's my front. And so on this one, I don't need this long piece. I only need enough that I want to make sure that when I make the hem of this top piece, that it is right here in line with the bottom piece. Does that make sense? Or past this. So I could very well go down here. So here's my one of my backs. Here's the other back. And I'm going to trim this off. And then I can tell you exactly how long they need to be for your next time. So I'm going to go ahead and press that. And this is exactly what I would do if I was just, not sure what size I needed to have. I just make everything bigger because I can cut off some, but I can't, glue it back on. And here's my underneath. So let me put this pen right here. So where that pen is where the hem of the top back needs to be. So I'm just gonna fold this back and cut it, and I'm gonna just cut it off. I could leave it, that's fine. It wouldn't hurt anything. But if you have, smaller pieces of fabric that you want to use up, so then this one would be like that. So now you can see, here's my hem of the underneath, Here's the hem of the top one. Here, I'll put them like this. So do you see, I don't have one overlapping the other because I don't want 4 pieces of fabric, 4 layers of fabric on top of one another. Does that make sense? So in actuality, if you were cutting this, it is, the width would stay the same. I think, what did I say, 6 inches? So this is about 6 1/4, 6 1/2, with a 1/2 inch folded down. And this one is 5 1/2 with 1 inch or so folded down. So you could still stack them up and cut this part going this way with your die. These would just be shorter pieces. Does that make sense? So that if you have scraps and they aren't big enough to do all 3 pieces one size, these are the sizes you'd be fine with. Does that make sense? Okay, and I want to make a note now. When we put this together, the first back that we lay down is the one that's going to show. So I want the back that comes the closest up to this edge, and then put this one, the shorter one, down second. So the longer one down first, the shorter one down second. When we turn it right side out, it will look like that. And the reason I do this on everything I possibly can is because now I can stitch all the way around. I don't have to leave an opening. I don't have to fuss around trying to make it look like it doesn't show, but it always does. And then having to do a stitch to close it up and all that. I can go all the way around because I can turn it right side out through here. Does that make sense? And we want the overlap because we don't want to have it too close up to this first piece, because then it would if you move it, it kind of opens and you can see it. So we want plenty of overlap. Okay, so do you see how it is? So isn't it funny that the cutting part of this segment was like 10 seconds and the rest is about putting it together? Okay, so I'm going to take these and we're going to sew these. So I'm going to put them right up top now. I want to lay down, so my bird and the wing and the little wing. I probably should have had a little more contrast between the two, but I'll contrast it with thread. So like this one, I kind of did blue on blue, but see how I used yellow thread to make it easier to see it. Okay? So I've got to turn this towards me for the moment. I'm on my pressing sheet, so you want to be on your ironing board because you don't want to get this all set and then move it. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to peel off the back. So look, it's sticking to me, and it's not the sticky side, just the, what is it, the electricity in the air, I guess. And this is sticky, so we're going to go ahead and place it where we want it. Remember, you'll have a 1/4 inch seam all around, so if you don't want it centered, just keep an eye on it, or you're doing 2 birds, just keep an eye on those edges. And then my wing. And I think I'll put my wing going up like that. And then my little wing. And my little wing really needs to be centered to the bigger wing. Okay, so you notice I didn't put the bird down and heat set that, and then put a wing down, heat set that. I want to put it all down, no matter how many pieces I have. I want to put them all down before I put the iron on them. Because with the steamer seam, it's sticky. So it'll stay there for you. Okay? Then you'd have your applique pressing sheet. Now I've even lost my piece of paper. And we're going to count to 20 again. And no, I'm not counting quite to 20, but I'm trying to not make you have to, watch me iron. Okay? So now this is all ready. We have a choice. We can applique it the way it is, or we can put the batting under and applique it. And let's see if you can see. If you have the batting, it makes it a little more puffy. Can you see the puffiness of it? Yes, maybe you can see it along here. It's just a tad puffy. So it's not like flat as a pancake. It has, when I say a tad of dimension, I really mean just a tad. Okay? So I'm going to do it with the batting underneath. More because with the batting underneath, it's almost like a stabilizer. So I'm not going to have trouble with wrinkling so much when I do my applique stitching. If you have trouble with your applique stitching puckering a bit, you want to use, it's called Stitch and Ditch paper. If you go to my website, www.therightspot.com, and you go to my favorite notions and tools, there's some links there for some of the tools and products I use. If you want to purchase them, you want to see what they look like. I keep meaning to put them in the bottom of the videos, and I really need to do that because that would be a smart thing to do. But in the meantime, you can go to therightspot.com. Okay, so now this is ready to stitch, and I'm going to leave the batting underneath. Now, having said that, I think when I did my little eyeball, well, we'll see. When I did my little eyeball, I don't know if it was better to have the batting underneath or not. Only because I did it around a little white dot that was there. And I can't tell if the stitches sunk in a little bit too much or not. And that's why you do tests. You do a test to see. I'm going to do it the way it is, just because it's simpler. So now that's all set to go. So we've done all our pressing, we've done our cutting, we're ready to stitch. If I was doing a bunch of these, I would sit probably and stitch all of these. And, I'd have everything lined up in each in its own pile. I would just pick this up, stitch these two, go to the next one, stitch these two, go to the next one, stitch these two. And then I would come back and do the applique. If I was doing them in between things, because after a while, if you're doing 10 of them, you might get sick of it, then I would just keep them in a pile, and I would just get one done at a time, move it to the bottom of the pile. Another time, I have a little time doing another one, but I get all the cutting done and out of the way, especially if you have to, like I do, I have to take my cutting machine out and put it away when I use it. So it's easier to me to get all my cutting done, put them all together like this, put all the pieces there, not worry about fusing anything or ironing, and then put them in a baggie, and then just work on them in between other stuff. When you need a break from a big project, pull out one of these. It's easier. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and stitch. I have to get some things out of my way here. Only because I used the table for the camera when I was doing the screen of my machine. So let's go ahead and get ready to stitch. Okay, so we're on our straight stitch. I'm using top stitch 80-12 because I'm going to be top stitching my applique. It's okay to use your top stitch needle to get some of this stitching done. It's perfectly fine. I have on, and you've probably seen it a dozen times, my candle wicking foot, which means it's all open in the front. They do also make them plastic. If you have a plastic one, you want one that has like the metal on the bottom or some ridges just to help it grab. I prefer the all metal one myself. In Baby Lock, I know in Baby Lock it's the candle wicking stitch. It could be the same in Brother. So I've got to change my thread because I don't want to stitch with brown. I would probably normally stitch with blue on this, but my next option is white. I have regular sewing thread in the bobbin, and I'm going to use that same sewing thread in the bobbin even when I do my applique, and I'm going to applique with machine embroidery thread, which is a little thicker. It's shiny. I have lots more colors of machine embroidery thread than I do of sewing thread, so that makes it easier. But I still leave the white sewing thread in the bobbin. Or if anything, I would have blue in the bobbin to match this, just in case it showed. It's not going to show on the back here because this is going to be inside of the mug rug. So even though I have my, let me thread up. Even though I have my candle wicking foot on, I can still go ahead and stitch. And I'm stitching from the back because I want to see where this hem is. Okay? And you can lock it if you want to, but you don't have to because we're going to come around the whole thing when we put it all together. And I'm just going to, I stitch, so I'm just going to quickly press this. So now it's nice and flat. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. And you notice this hem was a little smaller than the other one. That's fine. Nobody's going to know. You'll be okay. So you can see I'm stitching right along this edge, okay? Don't get too close to the edge. And I just gave it a little press, and I'm just going to set my two backs aside, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and do my stitching of my bird. So I'm going to go ahead on my screen. I'm going to my number 2 tab where I showed you, and we're going to the blanket stitch. And generally, on most machines, when you select the stitch, it should tell you what it's called. I can't say it's true on all machines, and so I got to change my thread to what I'm going to applique with. And on this first one I did, I used yellow around the bird. Let's see if you can see it. Yellow around the bird, blue around the first wing, pink around the second. This time I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to use yellow the whole time. And part of the reason I'm doing that now, besides it's quicker, but I want you to see what it looks like if you use just one color. It looks just perfectly fine. So you don't have to change to 20 different colors if you don't feel like it. You're given this as a gift. You want it to look nice, but hopefully the person's going to use it and probably get coffee stains, tea stains, whatever on it. So it isn't going to stay perfect forever, and that's okay. And whoever gets it is going to be glad that they got it. Okay, so I want to look at this bird, and I need something to point with. Guess I'll use this. Okay, so when we look at this bird, I want to do as continuous of a stitch without stopping as I can. I'm going to do whichever piece of applique that you put down first should be the first one that you stitch. So I'm going to start here so that I can go all the way around and end here. So I wouldn't start like over here, go around and stop, and then start and go around. I've got a perfectly good start and stop, or start and stop, depending which way your bird's going. Okay? When I'm stitching, I'm this way, so that I'm stitching along here. So I know I can't start here. I'd be stopped before I got going. And I don't want to turn it around this way. I could, so I'm not sure if you're left-handed, if that is more comfortable. But if you do, you have to mirror image your blanket stitch so it bites to the right instead of the left. So if you're left-handed or you just happen to like going in this direction better, just mirror image. And a lot of machines have the mirror image button somewhere. Just mirror image so that your bite is going into your fabric. So I'm going this way. Okay, so the stitch is set up to bite to the left. Okay, some machines may have one to the left and one to the right if they don't have mirror image. So you just have to become a little more familiar with your machine. All right, so I want to make sure that, let me come in just a tad more. Okay, and I'm going to hope that with my hands in the way or out of the way, it doesn't change the focus, but it looks pretty good so far. So I'm lining up as best I can where my needle is going to come down into my fabric, but I'm going to use my hand wheel, which is over on the right side of your machine. So I'm going to try to do this without, like last time I did, tip the camera over. And I'm just going to bring my needle down, and I'm going to move my fabric until my needle is just off the bird fabric. So you think of it as the left edge of the needle is rubbing against the bird fabric, the yellow. And I'm starting right in that corner of where the red and the yellow meet. And I'm going to do a locking stitch. So I have a button to do a stitch in place. So I'm locked. I have to lock at the beginning and end of my appliques because there's no seam to grab a hold of those or go over those edges. So when you applique, as a rule, unless you're going out to the edge of the fabric out here, you have to lock those stitches. Okay, we good so far? All righty. So I'll go along slow so that you can see, and I'm going to tell you what it's doing, which will be monotonous, I know, but this is what I do in my head, sometimes out loud, but usually in my head, because I have to be aware of when the bite takes place, which means I'm stitching onto my bird fabric, and when it's going straight, because when I pivot and turn, I don't want to be on a bite, I want to be on the straight stitch. So I'm doing this one-handed because I can't get my hand in it. It'll be in your way. Okay? So I'll turn my speed down a little on my machine. So what's going to happen is it's going to go forward. Okay, so this stitch is going forward, bite, forward, bite. Some stitches will go forward, back, forward, bite, forward, back, forward, bite. And that's just going to give you a thicker looking stitch. And again, you try this on a scrap fabric to see if you got the one you want. Okay? So this one will go faster. So this one just does forward, bite, back, forward, bite, back. So this is a pretty simple one. Now, I need to adjust my fabric So I want to make sure that I'm back in, I'm going to call it back in position, which means along the edge of my applique shape, so that I can turn it. If I did it on the bite, so if I bite in here and then I turn my fabric, my bite coming out is going to be somewhere else. So we want to try to avoid that if we can. Okay, I'm at the end and it went forward, so it wants to bite. So I'm going to turn it halfway so it's biting in to the bird's tail, which is this is the shape in here. I'm at this end, so it's going to bite into this little edge of the tail. See, like that. Then I'm going to turn a little bit. Because generally when you're turning the corner, you're not always turning all at one time. I am going to stop and cut that thread, because I find if I cut the threads when I see them, I get rid of them better. And I am able to turn this because it's a slight curve. I can turn as I go, but I'm going to stop every once in a while. I'm on pivot. So when I take my foot off my foot pedal, my needle goes into the fabric, my foot comes up, and now I can move this without it falling off the sewing area. So you're not going to get a special trophy if you go all the way around without stopping. No trophy there. What happens is you'll see, especially with your batting there, is you don't want this to start getting puckery. And it's really not. It's just dragging with the foot because of the turn. Okay, it's awful quiet. Somebody needs to sing or something. So I got involved in stitching. So you saw where I got to where the beak was, and again it was one of these kind. And so I always want to try to have a stitch coming into where that point is to hold that point down. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and post them, or if you want to see it up closer, or I don't know if I can stitch up closer. I mean, I move the camera up closer if you can see okay. So now I'm coming to where the wing and the bird are meeting, and I just want to take my time. And I want to get as close with my needle, excuse me, to this red, not this red, but the outside red, as I can, which I'm pretty close. And I'm going to just lock that stitch. Okay, so there's my stitching. Let's see if it'll focus in here. Hold on. Probably if I held it still, it would help. No, boy, it didn't want to focus there. So there's my beak. Here's the tail. Okay, so now, now it gets to be easy because there's no stopping. We can go right around. So I'm not going to start out here because that's where someone's eye would go, and I can see that I was a little crooked putting this on, but that's okay. I'm going to start in this little area where the two meet, only because there's other things to distract if I don't have it exactly right. So again, I'm going to use my wheel and come down, and I'm right at the edge of the red. I'm going to do my locking stitch. And I'm using both hands to turn the fabric. And I had a slight curve, so I was able to go straighter longer. But now I'm coming into more of a curve, so I will keep stopping and adjusting my fabric. And you notice every time I stop, I'm out on the yellow straight stitch, the yellow fabric straight stitch, or straight part of the stitch. Well, now I took a bite more than I wanted, so I'm going to make sure I end that bite. Sometimes your foot doesn't come off as fast as you think, or the machine does one more stitch than you planned on. And I'm almost done. So you can see this particular little bird goes pretty quickly. I'm coming out to the tail. I've got a bite, and then I'm going to go straight, and it takes me to the very point of the tail. I'm going to turn part way so that my bite is going in. Is my tail. My bite's coming in right where the point is, or pretty close to it. And I'm going to show you what I did wrong. Well, we'll say it's wrong, but not really. I mean, it is, but it's okay. So, because this edge of my inner wing is close to the edge of my underwing, see how much space I got here? My bite stitches here are almost on this wing. So I could probably, let's see if I can warm it up and move it. Let's see if that works. So I just put it under the iron for a second. It probably won't work. No, see, because I really put it down. And I don't want to pick at it and make a mess. I'm okay, but I'm barely okay. You know what I'm saying? And if I had stitched onto the wing, when I come around with this wing, it would go right over that bite and probably never make a difference. But I wanted you to see how I have so much space up here, and I don't have as much down here. See that? Okay. So now we just got one to do, and then we'll do the eyeball. Okay, so stick with me. So I'm gonna, again, I don't want to start out here where it's easy to see where I stop and start, because when I stop and start, the two bites from the start and the stop might be a different distance than the rest. And if I'm in here, okay, well that worked out more than perfect. There it is. So there's where I started, and there's where I stopped on the bite, and then I took one more stitch in so you can see my little thread. Trust me, it isn't always going to work out perfectly. So I'm going to start down in this area where I have all that double stitching going on, and I think that I will just come in a little ways. I don't want to be at the edge, and that never works out well for me. So I'm just going to come in a little ways, and I'm still in the area where the stitching from the outer wing is pretty close to the inner wing. So I'm going to lock that stitch. So you want to make sure that when you stop stitching one piece that you're on the straight, because you want to be on the straight when you start again. You have a button on some of the machines, and let me tell you what it looks like. I'm going to turn the camera for a second, so hang on. See if I can get it. Okay, do you see where that needle, I have both hands on the camera. Do you see where the needle and the star and the heart and the star are? Right there. Oh, hold on. Right there, that one. If you have that icon, wherever it may be in your machine, if you have that icon, when you hit it, will take you back to the beginning of whatever stitch you're working on. So when you get done stitching, you would go ahead and hit that button. That'll make sure your needle's back in the right position, and literally on the right, to start your next one. And quite a few machines have it, Baby Lot and Brother. It's just a matter of finding it on your machine. And I was going to tell you what it's called, but I'm not sure. I just know it's the needle with the star, a heart, and a star. It might be in where you go to make your stitch length and width adjustment. I'm going to continue on. And I'm coming into more of a curve. Are we getting out of focus? I can't tell. Here we go. That's what I'm trying. Well, that was worse, wasn't it? Okay. I'm trying to keep this hand out of the way because I think the adjustment goes with that hand. But I'm coming into more of a curve, so I'm going to stop more often. Also, you'll find if you can, and you're using the machine embroidery thread, you'll have less problem with it sticking to the needle than the sewing thread because it's silkier, but it's a little heavier. And if you have to, stop every once in a while, put your needle up, and kind of pick off if you got that sticky. If you got, and you'll see it, it'll be like a little tiny wad. I mean, tiny, but you'll see it easily enough. And if you get it a lot, just take your applique over and just iron the whole thing again. Okay, so I'm coming around, and I want to make sure that I get rid of that thread that I started with and get it out of my way before I get there. And I know my focus, because I messed around with it, now is going in and out. And I apologize. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way. I'm coming up on the little tail end. Okay, so this time I couldn't get in at the point. So what I'm doing is I'm stitching with the straight part across the point, just so that point is nicely held down. and then I'll turn to get the bite. And I'm back to the beginning, but I don't want to stitch over the beginning. I just want to get to the beginning and then lock it. Okay, so let's go back to the work table and let me see what questions there are. Okay, so there we go. And see, I used the yellow for the whole thing, and that's looking fine. And there's where the, oh, where am I? Here. There's where the two are close together, but it's still, this camera's doing nice on the close-up. Look at that. And that's fine. It's a little close, but that's fine. And see, since I started in there, because there's so much going on with stitches close to each other, nobody's going to notice if you were perfect or not. Okay, so that's using just one color of thread. Okay? And this is a different thread for each shape. So with all the yellow, it just makes this stand out. To me, it stands out a little more because it gives it more yellowness, for lack of a better word. And then all your stitching is on the back. And this is going to be inside your mug rug, so it won't show. So let me see what we have here. Let's see. Thanks, Rhonda. Yes, you can hand, Christine, you can hand draw a bird. Yep, you can do whatever you want. Oh, thanks, Cindy. Okay, so now we're going to put on the little eyeball. And we're going to go to the buttonhole section. So you need to have a machine that has a one-step buttonhole. If you look in your accessories that came with your machine, if you have this little tool, and it's been the same, I swear, for 100 years, because I am 100, it's got a bright orange handle. And at the other end, you think there's going to be a screwdriver, and there's not. It's a little round circle. And above the end is a hole that goes all the way through. And I don't have, if I was paying attention, I was going to, because we're not using it. But if you have that tool, then you have an eyelet stitch in your machine, because that tool is meant to cut the hole in the eyelet. We're not cutting a hole. We don't want to cut a hole there. But if you have that tool with the bright orange handle, and at the bottom of it, it's not a screwdriver. It's like a little tiny round circle that's, I don't know, maybe an eighth of an inch, if that. Then that means you have an eyelet stitch on your machine somewhere, and it's always with the buttonholes. Okay? So I'm going to switch my thread to brown, and I'm going to change my stitch to the eyelet stitch, and I'm going to go as small as I can on the size. I could go bigger, I guess. I don't know. That's pretty small. I'll go medium this time. I'll go medium small. And I just have to line up, and I always say line up and pray, but you're going to practice first. So if you're going to practice where to put it, draw something, then put the eyelet in it and see if you get it right. You know, it doesn't move all that far, so you should be okay. So let me see if anybody has any questions while I change my thread to brown. I don't use black because I find it a little harsh, so I use brown or dark gray. I'm going to get my eyelet stitch ready. So it naturally on my machine is 7.0 width and length. I'm going to go to 6. The other one I did was 5, but I'll make a bigger one just for you so you can see what it looks like. How's that? So Cindy said that was a helpful tip. Okay, you're welcome. I don't know which one it was, but you're welcome. Any helpful tip is good. I'm just threading my machine in case it just sounds too quiet. So I'm using an embroidery thread, machine embroidery thread, not hand embroidery. And I'm still leaving the white in the white regular sewing thread in the bobbin. So let's switch over. And I'm going to see if I can move my, okay, hopefully that looks pretty good. Hopefully it won't go out of focus on us. So I'm going to live on the edge, and I'm going to say that I want the eyelet right there. Now, if you have on your machine, which a lot of machines have, you have a cutting and a tie-off button, or two separate buttons, and automatic. So I've set mine, so when it's done the eyelet, it's going to go ahead and do a locking stitch and cut the thread. So here we go. No hands. Did you hear it cutting everything? Wasn't that handy? Okay, let's go to the work table because we can see better. And let me give it a trim. Oh, that's a good size. Oh, how's that? That's a pretty good size. And it went around fine and with my batting on the back. It's good. You could go around twice. I wouldn't move it. I would just go around twice. But I think I would, if I got it so I was happy with it, I wouldn't try to be happier because that, as a rule, doesn't work out for you. So there's our bird. Okay? So before I forget, I'm going back to my straight stitch. Okay, so you could quilt this now, or you could quilt it after you have the back on. So, personal preference. You don't actually have to quilt it at all. You could have quilted it first. I tend not to because depending on what fabric I have here, I wouldn't want my quilting stitches to be bumpy. Okay, so on this one, hold on, let's see, where's my stitching? So on this one I used pink thread because I had this pink already going through. So see how I did the pink right there and right there? Now up here, I did this so you could laugh at me. I used the Serpentine Stitch, and do you see how this is printed on the fabric? So I did it over where it was, sort of over where it was printed, but not quite. Now, could I have gone smaller with the Serpentine Stitch? Yes, but then I'd have been there all day. So here, it looks like little hearts because there's the print and then there's the stitch. Can you see that? And then I tried to follow it along right down the center of the print. And then I thought, oh, well, I tried it two ways so you could see. And then I just went regular, and I just went between these two blue lines with the pink to kind of go with this pink on the end. And I did this one right through the whole business. Now, the problem with that is because I have to stop and start, which is fine, but on the back, it stops and starts. So I would probably quilt this as it is right now, and I would just do some lines across. I would do a straight stitch. I would have it at 3.0 stitch length, or let me see. So my machine at regular is 2.5. I would go to 3.0. I know Janome, they start with 2.0. I would go to 2.5 or 3. I want a bigger stitch because I'm going through this padding, the batting. And so if I kept a regular little stitch, it would be even smaller because there's an exact amount of thread per stitch, no matter how much you're going through. So the stitch ends up being smaller and squished in because it doesn't have a lot of thread to work with. So that's why I go up to 3.0 or 3.5. Okay? So in this case, I'm not gonna quilt it. I know we're running low on time. But we do want to put it together. So you remember I said put the longest one down first. So it's right sides together. The longest one's down first if you want your opening up one end. You could have it in the middle, but you still want to overlap them. I'm going to kind of put it up towards one end. And then this is the shorter one, but remember, and you can see here, see how this hem has passed, the hem of the top fabric is past the hem of the bottom fabric. Okay? And we want to make sure it's lined up around the outside edges. What do I want? Clips. All right, I made a new clip tray and now, and I filled it full of stuff, didn't I? That's why, see, I have a second tray. This one's a little bigger. I'm going to call it my die tray to put my dies while I'm working with them, but I don't want to put them away yet. How's that? That's a die tray. And this is our Saturday sew along. So I want to make sure that I clip right where the two overlap. And you can pin. So that's plenty, that's all I need. Now, I'm not going to start at a corner. I'm going to start in a ways. And remember, I'm going all the way around. I don't need to leave an opening. I don't want to start right here or start right here. Don't start in places that have extra busyness, things going on. Okay, Cindy was asking, does the shorter stitch make a pucker? It could, Cindy. It could, because it just doesn't have enough thread, and it can't. It almost doesn't have enough thread to get through the thickness, so it tries to sink in, which pulls the whole thing in. So yes, it could. Yes, it could. Okay, so I'm going to start about right here and stitch all the way around. When I get to here, I want to be careful because I don't want this to flip up on me. Whether you start on one side or the other, at one point somebody's flipping up. So we just got to keep an eye on it. So I'm going to start here. I'm not going to lock it because I'm going to go all the way around and I'm going to go over where I started and then lock my stitch because this doesn't show. And I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay? Because this is small, I don't want to make it even smaller. All right, so let's sew. I'm going to leave this foot on just so you can see where I am. It's fine. But you can switch to your J foot or your 1/4 inch foot with the guide. I noticed when I did this that when I put my candle wicking foot down, my fabric, can you see? It's just to the inside of the, I'm going to call this the toe. These are little toes. So this is the foot, this has got to be the toes. So it's just riding the inside of this right toe. Oh, I had my automatic locking on. I didn't mean to do that. Remember I had it on when I did the eyelet? So I've already locked, whether I wanted to or not. You notice I'm holding down my hem. I'm going to put my speed up a little bit. You know, if you have speed control, how about using it? You can move it, you know, in the middle of your sewing, in the middle of your project. It's okay. So I want to stitch down so that I'm even again with that edge. And you'll see my fingers in a minute. Okay, let's see if I can get that. Okay, so I was holding it just like this the whole time. This finger here, pointer, he's right on the corner. And I'm going to take that finger away, but you notice my other hand always stays. Now I turned it and I need to come one more stitch. So you're better to stop early and just scoot along one stitch at a time. If you forget and sew off the edge, that's fine. Just come back on the edge and stitch across. But you'd want to lock the one coming back on. And I forgot I've got my brown embroidery thread on. That's good. Isn't that good? Now I'm coming around to the end. Here's where I started. And I'm going to stitch over that a little bit. So my eyeball is aiming my stitching to go right over the stitching I already did. If you're not exactly over it, be to the little bit to the inside of it, and then it won't show that you're off. So there's my brown stitching. And you thought you were the only one that did those things. Okay, so now I just got to clip my corners. Okay, yeah, that probably shows better. Clip my corners. And I want to make sure, because I did a pretty skinny seam, so I better have had all my fabrics lined up. So now I'm going to do a little press. Because you know, Rhonda, when we sew, we press. Okay. Oh, that was an epiphany for you, Cindy? That explained a lot, did it? So we're just going to reach in, and we're only going to turn this side where our hand can go in. We're not going to turn this side. And I know some of you have seen me do this before. Because if I turn both sides, I can't get my tool up in the first side to get my corners right. So let's just turn the first side using your corner poking out tool. What's it called? Point turner. And you know, I always run my point turner. Watch me go across. See that? I always want to make sure I go the whole way across. Okay? Now, I'll go ahead and turn the other corner. The other half. But you see how this fabric goes over this one? In order to get my point turner in, I got to go like I'm digging for worms in there. So just turn one part at a time. And then watch, I'm going to go across. You'll see it. Can you see it go across? It's like there's some kind of little varmint in there. And I'm going to come down the side because I can see that was kind of pulled in. There we go. And you're going to have your big iron with some steam, and you're going to steam, especially along the edges, because that's batting folded over. So squish it right down. As I say, squish the guts out of it. So there we go. I'm perfectly happy with no quilting on there. You could have, and still could, you could just stitch like a 1/4 inch away from the bird as a little outline. That would be kind of cute. Oh yeah, Rhonda. Iron, iron, iron. So for those of you that don't know this story, Rhonda's in a class of mine, and she said one day, if she knew quilting was going to require so much ironing, she probably wouldn't have started. So I tell her every time I tell everybody to stop and iron, I always think of her. And she's learned to have her friend, Sewing Nancy, does the ironing on Saturday class. So there we are. There's our opening. Oh, look. It's my new phone holder. How about that? Hey, I can put my phone down on my desk and nobody'll know it's there. It's my new phone holder. It's a little wide, but hey, it works. Phones are getting so big. So does anybody have any questions? So there we are. There's your eyeball. So if you want to take a, let me get it straight here. If you want to take a picture to remind yourself about the eyelet, eyeball, and let me see if I can hold it still without, there we go. It shows you your eyelet eyeball, but it also shows just using one color thread for the whole bird. Okay? Now, if you quilt now, like go around the bird, this is going to be closed up forever, which, as long as you're not using it for your phone, that's fine. You know, if you were taking this with you someday when you get to go to your friends and you want to have tea, you could stick your tea bags in there, and then you're all set to go. Because, you know, you visit people, they don't all have tea. Okay? And this measures, finished, it measures, well, I guess I can count. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. 6 3/4 it turned out to be. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. And here's my cup, and it's a bigger cup, but that works for me. Because what I would do is I'd have the cup here and I'd have a snack on this part. Okay, so does anybody have any questions, last minute questions, or need any explanation? If I was going to quilt around the bird, just an outline, about a 1/4 inch away, I would use the 3.0 stitch length. I don't need to drop my feed dogs, because if I can get around this curve with my applique stitch, surely I can get around this curve with a straight stitch. It's just a matter of stopping and turning and stopping and turning and stopping and turning. If you're fortunate enough to have a machine that has a pivot, it is way, way easier when you're doing that. Okay, and what did I do with the other guy? Oh. So here's a close-up of this one, in case you want to see the different colors and a little bit of quilting. And yeah, it does look different when you do the quilting. And I probably will go all the way around, and I'll post a picture afterwards. I just don't want to hold you up longer than we already are. So I'll do one that's an outline around the bird with some blue thread. and I'll post that on Facebook in the same place that you can post your project for tonight, because really everybody else just loves to see everybody likes to see everybody else's fabric choices and all that stuff. It's a lot of fun to watch. I mean to see. Okay, so thanks again, everyone. I'll see you Saturday at, don't forget, 1:30 for this little project, and it'll post in the morning. And I know I got the fabric. I know I got the fabric requirements on that one. It should post early in the morning tomorrow. Just 2 fabrics, and also there's going to be a link to get your template. Here's mine. Got my face in the picture again. You'll have a template that you can download. There's a link for the download, and it says right on here, Christine. Well, this one says do not cut out, but it's going to say do not cut out the circle of fabric. So you're going to put this down on your fabric, on the wrong side of your fabric, trace around, leave it alone. No, nothing else. And actually, we'll trace in class. Just have your 2 fabrics, because we don't want to be cutting on that line, and you'll see why. Okay, so thanks again, everyone. And I will see you Saturday at 1:30. If I don't see you then, I'll see you next Thursday at 7. So thanks again, everyone, for joining in. Have a good night. Bye.